Imagine a quiet American town where the evenings fall early, the streets empty out, and life seems predictable. The kind of place where you recognize the cars parked on your street, where you see the same people in the same stores week after week, and where nothing truly terrible is supposed to happen. That is where one of the most disturbing true crime cases in American history slowly unfolded. Not in a burst of violence, but drop by drop, year after year. This is the story of Gary Ridgway, the man later known as the Green River Killer. And what makes his case so chilling is not only the number of victims, but how long he lived among ordinary people without drawing attention. He did not look like a monster from a movie. There were no wild eyes, no dramatic scars, no theatrical speeches. He looked like someone you might pass in a store, or nod to absent-mindedly at a gas station while you fill your tank. You would not remember his face 10 minutes later. He was a factory worker, a truck painter, a man with a job, neighbors, marriages, arguments, routines. And that is exactly what makes this story so terrifying. The idea that someone so ordinary could be hiding something so monstrous, and that for years, no one saw the full truth. At first, no one understood what was happening. Women began to disappear across the area around Seattle and Tacoma. Some were very young, barely out of childhood. Some were runaways. Many were sex workers or women living on the edge of society, the kind of people that the world, unfairly, often pays less attention to. They vanished in different months, from different streets, in different circumstances, but all into the same heavy silence. Families reported them missing, posters went up, files were opened. On paper, they looked like separate tragedies. In reality, they were chapters of the same story. At first, the cases looked separate, as if they were unrelated, terrible but isolated events. Different names, different dates, different locations. It was easy in those early days to believe that they had nothing to do with each other. But then the pattern became impossible to ignore. The same type of victim, the same general area, the same ugly feeling in the gut of every detective who had seen too many crime scenes. Again and again, the same kind of loss appeared. The same fear returned. And somewhere behind that fear was one man moving through the city unnoticed, watching, choosing, hunting. The Green River itself became a symbol of horror, this quiet stretch of water in Washington state, which once meant nothing more than a line on a map, turned into a name whispered with dread. Along the river and in nearby wooded areas, bodies and remains were discovered. Some victims were found partially submerged, some on the banks, some scattered in nearby ravines and forests. The scenes were grim, but not only because of what had been done. Time and nature had worked on the remains. Some victims were found in conditions that made identification extremely difficult. Bones and fragments where a person used to be. What investigators slowly realized was that they were not dealing with a single murder, or even a few, but with a long-running series of killings carried out over many years. Ridgway was not a theatrical killer. He did not leave dramatic messages or taunt the police. He did not try to build a famous persona for himself. He was methodical, quiet, and frighteningly practical. He chose women he believed would not be missed immediately, often offering rides or money, gaining enough trust to get them alone. He would assault them, strangle them with his hands or with a ligature, and then discard their bodies near the river or in other secluded places. After that, he simply returned to his ordinary life as if nothing had happened. For years, the investigation moved painfully slowly. Police had too few clues, too many missing women, and not enough answers. Leads came and went. Task forces were formed and disbanded. Detectives worked late nights over piles of photographs, timelines, and reports. Still, the man behind the murders remained a shadow. That is one of the worst parts of any long-running case. The killer is still out there, living his life, perhaps driving past the same crime scenes where police are standing, but proving it is nearly impossible. People in the region kept living their lives, driving the same roads, visiting the same places, never knowing that someone nearby was turning their city into a hidden graveyard. During that time, Ridgway lived as an ordinary man. He went to work. He argued with his wife. He mowed his lawn. He sat in traffic. He was interviewed by police more than once, even took a polygraph test, and passed it, which later became one of the most infamous failures in the history of lie detection. That kind of normal appearance combined with early investigative missteps is what makes dangerous people so hard to catch. Eventually, the investigation began to come together, but it took much longer than anyone wanted to believe. A clearer picture emerged. This was not one isolated crime, not even 10, but a serial pattern of murder spanning years, maybe decades. And then, slowly, the tools available to investigators changed. New forensic methods arrived, especially advances in DNA analysis. Evidence that had been collected years earlier, semen, trace materials, small biological samples, suddenly became far more powerful. In the early years, DNA testing was in its infancy. Scientists tried, but they could not get clear, usable profiles from some of the evidence. The case, as one forensic scientist later said, had basically come to a standstill. But as technology improved, the same old samples told a new story. Forensic teams generated fresh DNA profiles from several victims and compared them to DNA taken from Ridgway years before, preserved from a sample of his saliva collected on a piece of gauze. The match was not subtle. It was direct and undeniable. Suddenly, after years of fog, the case had a name: Gary Ridgway. That was the moment when a decades-old investigation finally met modern science. It is one of the great ironies of the case that Ridgway hid so well for so long in an era that lacked the tools to catch him, only to be exposed later by a few microscopic traces he had left behind. DNA does not forget, and it does not lie. It waits in sealed envelopes and evidence lockers until science is ready to hear what it has to say. One of the most painful parts of the story is that many of the victims remained unnamed for years. Some of them were listed only as numbers in police files, like Bones 17, known more by a case label than by a human name. Their bodies were found, but identification took decades. Families lived without answers for far too long, holding on to old photographs and fading memories, while file numbers sat in cold metal cabinets. Even in recent years, new victims have been identified through DNA. Young women like Wendy Stevens and Lori Ann Respotnik, finally given back their names after decades as anonymous remains. That is what gives this case its deepest emotional weight. It is not only about a serial killer, but also about the long delay between tragedy and truth. Each unnamed victim represents a life that was nearly erased by time. Each newly identified person is a reminder of how many years passed in silence, how many birthdays and anniversaries were missed, how many families never got a chance to say goodbye properly. When Ridgway was finally caught and charged, the case moved from investigation to judgment. In court, as part of a plea agreement with prosecutors, he confessed to 48 murders, more than any other convicted serial killer in United States history at that time. He admitted that there were more victims, possibly 70, 80, maybe even more than that. The exact number may never be known. He accepted a deal that spared him the death penalty in exchange for full cooperation and information about his crimes. And in return, he received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. It was one of the most shocking confessions in American criminal history. In a calm, almost emotionless voice, he described killing women, leaving their bodies, and sometimes returning to the sites afterward. But even that confession could not undo the damage. It did not return the dead, and it did not erase the years when no one knew who was responsible. The courtroom provided a legal ending, but it could not provide a clean, emotional one. What makes Ridgway especially horrifying, even after all the details, is how ordinary he seemed. He was not a shadowy figure from a distant nightmare. He was a man of his time, blending into everyday life, moving through the world without setting off alarm bells. He went to work, attended barbecues, drove past schools, and sat at red lights like everyone else. That is the central terror of the Green River case. Evil does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and invisible. Sometimes it goes to work in the morning, shops in public in the afternoon, and sleeps beside future victims for years before anyone knows. As more details came out, the case became not only a true crime story, but also a powerful example of what modern forensic science can do. DNA evidence gave investigators what they had been missing for decades: a direct connection between a person and the crimes. A fragment of saliva, a trace on a victim's body, a genetic profile stored in a database. Together, they built a bridge from old, unsolved murders to a living suspect. That scientific breakthrough saved the case from being lost to history. But the human tragedy remained. Every report, every file, and every match represented a life that had already been destroyed, and a family that had waited too long for the truth. The Green River Killer case is about more than one man. It is about persistence, detectives who refuse to let the file gather dust. It is about forensic science, the slow, careful work of people in labs who never met the victims, but fought for them anyway through microscopes and test tubes. And it is about the painful reality that some crimes hide in plain sight for years. Ridgway was not a stranger to the area. He was part of it. It is also about the victims, many of whom were ignored or forgotten for too long. Women whose lives did not fit a comfortable narrative, whose disappearances did not immediately inspire public outrage, whose families often had little power or voice. The horror of the story is not only in the killings themselves, but in how slowly justice arrived. Ridgway was finally stopped, convicted, and locked away for life. Yet the shadow of what he did still hangs over the case, because some truths take decades to surface, and some wounds never fully close. What makes this story unforgettable is its contrast. On the surface, everything looks ordinary. A normal man, a normal city, a normal day. Beneath that surface was a systematic series of murders, a long and painful investigation, and a final revelation that came only after years of silence. The Green River Kai case remains one of the most disturbing true crime stories ever told. Not because it is the loudest, but because it is so quiet, so methodical, and so real. It is not just shocking, it is deeply human, deeply unsettling, and a reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters are the ones no one notices until it is far too late.